Will you be content with your life when your time is up? How will you deal with your loved ones when their time is up? It's difficult in life to lose the people we love, the people we hold dear in our hearts and minds. We can live in regret, doubt, and a deep longing to connect with the people we care about, and the only way we really can is through the memories and moments we share with them. What happens if we lose them? Does that mean they're gone? I am overjoyed to be sharing this amazing gem with you today. It's a game where the characters feel like real people in ways that not many games can say they can do. Let's talk about the psychological story of a dying man's wish. Let's talk about a great example of how to craft puzzles seamlessly with a story. Let's talk about one of the finest examples of storytelling in games today. Let's go to the moon. But first, a history lesson. To the Moon comes to us from a team directed by Canadian developer Con Gao through his company Freebird Games. Con's games have had a good amount of No! Go back in your corner. No. Anyway, he's had a good amount of praise for his previous work, like his epic RPG Quintessence and his short games The Mirror Laid and Do You Remember My Lullaby. Gao makes all of his games through the RPG Maker engine, including To the Moon, which marks his very first commercial release. This is actually a very personal game for Gao, as it was inspired by a number of events in his real life. One of the biggest inspirations was Gao's grandfather being rushed to the hospital due to heart conditions. His grandfather did recover, but at the time, it was Gao's very first encounter with death within his own family. After experiencing that, he wondered when his time came if there would be anything in his life he would regret. Through that experience and a few other events that happened in his life, Con describes it as helping fill the gap to create the game. One of the goals was, quote, an attempt to turn various misfortunes into something good. Along with a small team of animators and illustrators, along with co-developer Lanny Nelly III, Con did most of the writing, directing, and composing the soundtrack himself, along with some help from Laura Shigehara. But I'll get to that later. To the Moon tells the tale of two scientists, Dr. Ava Rosaline and Dr. Neil Watts of the Sigmund Agency, an organization that can create artificial memories and even go inside and explore past memories of a specific person. They go to the house of a dying old man Johnny, where they're contracted to implant an artificial memory of him going to the moon. The only thing though is that Johnny is comatose, and they can only contact him through one of his early projected memories. The big mystery of the game is that Johnny doesn't remember why he wants to go to the moon or why it's so important to him. The doctors can't just create a fake memory of him orbiting Tom Hanks style, so they have to delve into his past experience to give Johnny a conscious yearning to go into space. So that's it in a nutshell. These two go in his noggin to figure out why he wants to go to the moon. Think of it as Inception and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind mixed with Memento for a bit of extra flavor, which is kind of ironic to point out because To the Moon was directly inspired by Eternal Sunshine. The story is told backtracking through different moments of his life, finding objects scattered around a specific memory. Here's where the player comes in. Now, looking at this footage, the game looks like a JRPG, smells like a JRPG, if that's possible, and feels like a JRPG in the realm of a Chrono Trigger or a Final Fantasy VI, but in actuality the game is much more akin to a point-and-click adventure game with a simple interface. The gameplay is mostly a scavenger hunt where you have to collect 5 objects, people, or certain spots around a small place in order to move on with the story. These are called memory links that would kickstart Johnny's memories to unlock what the game calls a memento, which serves as a passage into Johnny's next memory. Then, flipping block puzzle time! This is where you piece together the memento to create a link and proceed with the story. And don't worry, this isn't the super annoying kind of block puzzle like in Mickey's Ultimate Challenge, Bart vs. the Space Mutants, or the indie game Cogs. Well, okay, in the case of Cogs, it's the core part of gameplay with an innovative mechanic that works, but anyway, these puzzles only take a few moves to solve, and even keep score if you land the ideal number of hits and the least number of twists. The puzzles being as short as they are really helps the flow of the story and lets the players be a bit more interactive with the world. I can see people calling this whole system of finding things and going through the block puzzles a bit repetitive, but for my money, the pacing has just the right amount of story and gameplay to keep me hooked to the keyboard. It's worth mentioning that after I did my video on Dear Esther, shameless plugin! In Dear Esther, while I feel its gameplay was organic to its story to add to the mystery of who the player was supposed to be, it didn't really involve the player as much with it. Here, on the other hand, it lets the players be a bit more involved from a gameplay perspective. Is it fair to compare Dear Esther to the Moon with this kind of perspective? Not really. Both of these games set out different goals for one another and wanted their players to take away something else from playing it. Esther was all about experimenting with undersaturation. To the Moon served to tell its story and incorporate gameplay to add to the narrative while keeping the player engaged. Some have said that one works and one doesn't, or they both work. Personally, I'm in the opinion that they both serve what they want to do, but if you want something a bit more engaging, I go to the Moon. Well, not literally to the Moon, that would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars on top of being an astronaut and getting all that kind of training, and now I'm going on a tangent. Moving on! So To the Moon is much more involved towards its players, even though it doesn't always work all the time. A few times in the game was a bit frustrating to navigate with the mouse and have the character go to a certain point on the screen. It's not always the most accurate, and sometimes you have to go between the mouse and keyboard to navigate your character. There's also more or less an action sequence that happens later on in the game. Without going into spoiler territory, it does make sense with what's happening in the game, but it's not particularly well executed or all that interesting. These are by no means deal breakers and only small nitpicks in an otherwise very competent game. These can all be forgiven for its narrative, and oh man, is the narrative glorious. The whole game is essentially a mystery plot mixed with a psychological science fiction romance. Yeah. The game has a great understanding of when to give out information and what kind of information to the player to keep them curious. All the scenes are tight and help raise the stakes of the characters and the relationships that they have. The whole story is told in the perspective of the two scientists, and these two serve almost as the comedy duo of the game. They have a lot of funny interactions and tensions between the two, with Rosaline being the more competent and serious-minded one, while Watts is the more sarcastic and laid-back of the two. That's something To the Moon pulls off exceedingly well by seamlessly mixing comedy and tragedy. In the middle of a heavy emotional scene where Johnny is trying to connect with his late wife River, it's mixed with the doctors having witty banter with one another. Khan has said in interviews that he deliberately had these comedic interactions between the story to avoid the game becoming pretentious or taking itself too seriously. I'm not going to say a lot here because anything I say could give away some of the best jokes, but I will say this. Pickled olives. Trust me, you'll thank me for not spoiling that part for you. And actually, on the topic of spoilers and not really giving away anything, To the Moon is one of those games that's really hard to talk about without spoiling it for newcomers. I would love to talk about the heart of the story here between Johnny and River and how their relationship goes through the game, but it really is the kind of thing where anything I say about it could completely give it away. Their relationship isn't exactly the easiest one, and how it all plays out and how it's written is one of the most true-to-life stories I can recall in a game. Well, obviously the memory stuff isn't around yet, but the real-life truth is certainly there in the game. I know I'm being very vague for newcomers to the game, but it's for your own good. To the Moon is simply something you're going to have to take my word on. Although I would recommend to newcomers, you should have a pack of these handy with you. Mostly because it's, well, kinda... yeah. However, for those who have played the game all the way through, or, for those who don't want to play the game, boo you, I do have some thoughts that you may want to hear. So I think it's time for our friend Mr. Kavanaugh to make a visit again. If you saw my cave story video, you know the drill. When you see this styling guy at the bottom right of the screen, that's when the heavy spoilers are going to be. And when I'm done with the spoilers, I'll take them away. In fact, here's the time code of exactly where the spoilers end, so you can go right there. Alright, so the heavy spoilers for this game start right now. Okay, midway in the game, we understand that River is suffering through some kind of condition that leaves her disconnected from Johnny and her friends. This condition is called Asperger's syndrome. According to the U.S. National Library of Medicine, Asperger's is a disorder caused by an abnormality in the brain that tends to run genetically in families. One of the symptoms is where they can become overly focused or obsessed on a single object or topic, ignoring all others. Their problems with speech and language in a social setting can often lead to isolation where they withdraw from the world. They often have trouble forming relationships as children and are unable to respond emotionally in normal social situations, and they can sometimes show delays in motor development such as clumsiness and repetitive behaviors. Well, that's the textbook answer anyway. River fits all these traits and characteristics to a T, with her constantly being obsessed with the paper rabbits and constantly asking Johnny about them and what their meaning is. Well, okay, the paper rabbits are much more important to the story and the symbol between River and Johnny, but still it applies to Asperger's. It gives a sympathetic and tasteful view from those who suffer from the disorder. I can't really say I have any personal connection or real knowledge of Asperger's and what it does to families, but I can imagine that Johnny's conversation with River's sister Isabella is one that a lot of people have probably gone through with this kind of condition. The idea of Isabella losing part of her identity is a smart and insightful conversation that reveals part of River's determination and character. At first I thought that the horseback riding scene where she could have crashed in the beginning was just a cute little moment, but I actually realized later that it ties right into the disorder. Difficulty with motor skills can be a characteristic, and it was a really nice touch to add this here. I think my favorite line in the game is when Johnny asks River if she'll be alright riding a horse, and she responds, "I'll be fine, I'm not a child." It's an endearing line symbolizing River conquering her condition and embracing life. And of course the great irony of it all is that all the problems that these two have in their relationship isn't really Asperger's fault, but what happens with Johnny. It's ultimately a cautionary tale of tampering with the past and in a small way playing God. In the case here, not only were the sad times lost, but also the great times. A great little wink to Eternal Sunshine. I also really loved how the story reached the next level by introducing the dilemma to the doctors. At first you think they're just there to hold the story together and just be the comedy relief of the whole thing, but it actually turns out to be their story. It really raises questions about professionalism, responsibility, and the use of technology with or without wisdom. And ironically, the same technology that tried to solve all the problems in the first place is causing even more problems. A lot of people have said that it's a much more sad story and not really an uplifting ending, but I really disagree. I do think that it is incredibly sad that he got to lose all of his past memories with River. You'd have to be made of stone not to be moved or shed a little tears over the montage of the memories being erased. I think even the way it plays out, and even though that they did artificially make all of those new memories, he still got River at the end. I think it was Johnny's will to have her there. And to be honest, that's what I think the whole message of the story is. Even with all these memory problems, even with her having Asperger's, even through all the ridiculous crap that he had to go through, he still deeply loved her. He simply would have been incomplete without her in her life. It's a love conquers all story, and the characters are so wonderfully written and realized that it earns the heartbreaking ending. And I'm not ashamed for a second to admit that when they were holding hands in the very last shot, it definitely got a bit dusty in the room. Alright, take a little time to fade out of there, and spoilers are over, you're all safe. Darth Vader is never mind. As for the presentation, the graphics here are super crisp and well polished. This could easily be a bit of a younger brother to a Chrono Trigger or a Terranigma. I say younger brother because it's not quite going for the big scope of those two games, but for what it has and what it's trying to do, it does it pretty well. The interiors are nice and lovely, the backgrounds, especially going outside next to the lighthouse, are breathtaking, and the characters are all aesthetically pleasing and have enough personality in them through the animations. I also really enjoyed how it used its color to its advantage, for its more sadder moments having a kind of nice brown coffee filter effect, and for the more whimsical moments using more dreamlike colors and effects. It really goes with the kind of homemade sci-fi feel of the whole game. Either cool, slick, and stylistic, or nice homemade apple pie. Which is exactly how I would describe the sound effects. Take a listen to when you gather the memory links. It really is kind of an underappreciated form, just gathering those little things and hearing that awesome little sound. It's a nice little reward for the player. But one of the real joys in the game is that fantastic score. Most of it was conducted by Khan himself, and if the story and characters weren't enough to move you, the soundtrack here definitely will. Done mostly with piano, they range from tones from having a fun romp at a carnival, mystic or sad, worked right into the story. The song Four River, which you're listening to right now, starts off with just 2 notes and then slowly dances into this really lovely melody. As you can guess from the title, it's Johnny's testament to their relationship. Laura Shigihara. Laura's something we really need to talk about with her contribution to composing and singing a key moment in the game. Laura's no stranger to original video game music, as she has several games under her belt and is probably most well known for being the lead audio wizard on PopCap Games' money-making machine Plants vs. Zombies. She even has past experience working with Gao on his epic Quintessence. So what of her song Everything's Alright in this game?
He said, I can't really seem to read you. I just stood there, never know what I should do. When this world is no more, the moon is all we'll see.
How can I put it? At the same time that the song creates a great contrast to what's happening in the game, which I won't give away, if the rest of the game is something where you're going to need one of these, this moment in the game is where you're going to need one of these. Simply done with Laura singing and just the piano, it's a simple and effective composition that perfectly complements the subtle tone and feel that the game is going for. The context in the game and the great care and attention that Laura gave to the song leads to one of the best moments I've seen in a game in, well, maybe ever. So now that you've heard my usual ridiculously long spiel on the game, where can you find this little gem? You can find To the Moon at Gao's website freebirdgames.com. The game is a PC exclusive where you can either try the first hour of gameplay for free or buy the full game for $11.95 US, and thankfully has the option for foreign currency. It was also announced through Gao's Twitter that the game will be seeing a release on Steam within the very near future. As an added bonus, anybody who bought the game previously without Steam will receive a free Steam key through email to activate the game without buying it twice. Always awesome to hear that developers go the extra mile for its loyal fanbase. Khan has expressed interest in making a Mac or a Linux version through his forums, but for the moment, due to technical issues, right now it's PC exclusive. Also, anybody who does enjoy this game, I got some good news for you. Khan and Freebird are working on a brand new game using some of the same characters. While To the Moon doesn't have as much replay value with dramatically different storylines or outcomes, it's one of those rare video game stories that really sticks with you. With the questions and themes it raises about responsibility, technology, regret, and the past, at its core, this is the story of 2 people who love and deeply care about one another. I don't hesitate to say at all that this is master storytelling with true heart and humanity. It's something I'm honored to have experienced and cannot recommend highly enough. Now if you'll excuse me, I have another box of tissues to go through. Oh, item out, cucumbers. Before I go, I want to give a special thanks to YouTube user ChaoticMonki for allowing me to use his footage.
To try, at least. But we always succeed, because we're awesome. Oh, Dr. Watson.
If any of you know of a fine, awesome indie game that might be good for my show, feel free to drop me an email at addatworkproductions@yahoo.com. A super thank you to anybody who recommended this game and anybody who watches or supports the show. You guys are, ooh, something shiny.